Welcome to this REP video. This video is looking at measuring client outcomes and the completion of those forms. Again, the group has actually just finished, but your job is not done. This particular job in measuring client outcomes is primarily completed at the beginning of the first session and the end of the final session of the group. So it's not every session, but it's at the beginning and the end we need to attend to what you're about to see. Also, this segment tells us about pre-group interviews and the different nature of how we represent measuring client outcomes for that context. Enjoy.
Our data relationship with the government changed in about 2015. At that time, they brought out a new set of information that we had to report to, and one significant part of that is what we call the score data, which consists of the MCOs, or managing client outcomes, the goals, and community outcomes. It's sort of three different sections. Community outcomes is sort of interchangeable with the other two. So you only do either the community outcomes or the other two, and I'll explain a bit more about that later. In terms of why we do this, basically the government gave us the option of either reporting a very small amount of data or a much larger set of data. So this is part of the much larger set of data, and we agreed to do that reporting because it's good for our relationship with the government, and of course they're the ones who give us the money that keep us going. So that's why we're doing it. What they're really looking for in this data is that they've broken it down into a couple of domains that are areas in which they're interested in how we're working with clients and how clients are benefiting from that work. So we've chosen just some of those domains, not all of them, for the MCOs. I think there's 4 domains available. For goals, we've gone with all of the domains because it's just whatever fits the area that the client is interested in making a change. In relation to completing goals and MCOs, there's probably 2 areas that are particularly challenging for relationship education type programs or group services. That is the way partly our CRM is set up. Penelope is based around services, and it has a particular service for groups, so that the group service module only relates to the time that the client is actually in group sessions, and any other contact that occurs with the client has to be recorded within a separate service file. Because of the way that the government reporting works, they see those 2 service files as being separate services, and so there has to be goals and MCOs attached to each of those because they see them as separate services. That then means that you really have to split up the goal and MCO recording into those 2 distinct parts, and that's part of the reason why we've tried to simplify the process by giving fairly standard goals and MCOs to those service options, just to try and make it a bit easier. It also means that people have to remember not so much a difficulty for the pre-group interview, because you're doing the initial and the final versions of the goals and MCOs basically at the same time. But for the groups, you have to remember to go back and complete the goals and MCOs, the final one, at the end of the group process. So it's important to do that, and we try and give you some assistance in doing that by providing error reports in those situations where you might have forgotten. So in relation to goals and seminars, there is a difference when it comes to this reporting. Because seminars don't involve any pre-group contact, it's just the actual attendance of the group itself. It's not possible to be developing a sense of the individual goals for each person that attends a seminar. So we don't expect practitioners to provide that information in relation to seminars, only in relation to groups. Of course, groups, as far as we're concerned from a data perspective, is anything that has more than 3 sessions. So when you complete a seminar, what you're doing is completing the community-based version of the sort of score data, and so you're really just providing one score against the group for change that those people have experienced as a group.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. Often filling in MCO forms is quite difficult for new group leaders, so I'm just wanting to talk through how that may go. So as a group leader, the first bit of information I really need to do is to, as the group unfolds, is to get a clear understanding of what the client goals are. So in that pre-group interview and in the actual first week of the group, have a clear understanding for those group goals, for clients' goals, and record them, because it's actually going to help you when you complete your MCO form on the first week. What you would have actually done at the pre-group interview is that it's the first time that you would have had to complete an MCO form. Because it's a different event, you need to actually do a different MCO form.
That's correct.
And we have a bit of a cheat sheet in REP which actually makes it easier to complete. So on an actual sheet which has the client goals for the pre-group interview, there's only 2 goals. Is this the right group for me? So finding out more information about the group and if it fits with what I'm experiencing in my life right now. And if I want to do this group, are the only 2 client goals which really are relevant for the pre-group interview. So on the actual MCO form for the pre-group interview, there's those 2 clinical goals, which then the actual group leader has to make a judgment of what goal domain. And goal domain's a code for, what does the government mean when they say goal domain?
Well, it's really just the areas that they're interested in seeing some change occur.
Yeah, so some of those actual goal domains, and this is actually, remember the government sets this up for all services around Australia, and that may be for individual work, casework, or for seminar, community education. So they're very broad domains, but it's about improved knowledge, change skills, change behaviour, improved engagement with support services, dealing with the impact of immediate crisis. These are the issues that the government has an interest in funding. So we have to relate the goal of that pre-group interview to one of those domains.
That's right. And really the overriding rule is that you can only have one of each type of goal, but within that you can have as many goals as you like. But in your situation, you've tried to make it easier for the staff and sort of limit it further and give them a clearer idea about what the goals are and where they should be filled in.
And MCOs all work on pre and post measures. And in a group, that's easy. That's the first week and the last week. In a pre-group interview, it's the beginning of the pre-group interview and at the end. So it's a bit weird, but you've got to, as the group leader, make a judgment on where was the client around, is this a right group? Did they come into the session confident with a clear understanding they wanted to be there, or was there a bit of ambiguity and they were trying to work out what the group was about? This is going to determine if you actually rate them at the beginning of the session as no progress, limited progress but emerging engagement, limited progress but strong engagement, moderate progress, or goals fully achieved.
That's right. And you really do have to remember that it's just about that actual goal. You're not looking for anything broader. You're not looking for the person to be a better person after they've had their PGI. You just want to know, have they sort of gotten the information that they're required. Certainly what we don't want is anybody leaving the session with an assessment that's lower than the one that they came in with. That just wouldn't be correct.
And the other important thing which we need to pick up on is if you referred them somewhere. If this is not the right group, it's important that that client goes somewhere that their needs are best met, as well as capture that information on our cheat sheet, because that goes into the database too.
Yeah, that's correct. And referrals are one of the things that the government is most interested in, because you have to remember that they're funding a whole range of different services. And so they're interested to see that one service will link with another service in meeting the needs of any given client.
So to just look at the MCO form for a group context, again, we have some cheat sheets for our major groups which try to make it actually easier to capture the information on a double-sided page. On one of those sides is that we need to record what the client's circumstances are. Now, remember that the federal government is not wanting to waste taxpayers' dollars. So when they say that they have 4 domains that they have an interest in, those 4 domains are mental health and well-being, personal and family safety, family functioning, community participation and networks. As a group leader, you have to make a judgment call on what was the client's circumstances in coming along to this group, in which of those domains are an interest of them. And they could actually choose 1, 2, 3 or even 4 of them if the client's needs, required all of those domains to be met.
Yeah, that's correct. So you basically NA the ones that you don't think relate to that client and just fill the others in.
And again, remember the MCO forms work on pre and post. So that side of the form is then asking you to actually rate at the beginning of this group, so session 1, where are they at with that domain? And so you have to make a judgment call where it starts off as either significant negative impact that domain is having on their life, moderate negative impact, progress towards improving, adequate short-term progress, and adequate progress ongoing. At the end of the group, you have to do a final rating against those same domains where you're making a judgment on where did they end up. Were they at the same measure in that it didn't progress? Did it change and move forward? Did they actually go backwards, which can be one of the risks of a pre-post measure sometimes. Again, you're trying to refer and document on that sheet for each individual if there's any actual referrals made, which is important for our funding purposes. And is there anything else which they need to know about in making that judgment call about client circumstances?
Look, I think the most important thing is that if you think for some reason the client is worse off, and really here what we're saying is worse off because of the service and information that they've received from us, then you'd want to be really sure about that, and I would never put that down as your response until you've spoken to your supervisor about it or some sort of more senior person within the clinical team.
And remember, some people leave the group, which we still need to actually complete the pre-post measures for those clients as well. But sometimes people need to leave for a whole variety of reasons. And it's important to make a good judgment call on what those reasons may be as well, because sometimes clients then come back a period of time later to complete that program in a much more comprehensive way.
Sure.
So again, this is a piece of paper that stays with you throughout the duration of your group, the MCO form. On the other side of that cheat sheet is what we call the client goals. And in that client goals, it's got usually each of the groups specifically have a range of goals which are mapped to the context of that group. And that's where you have to make a judgment around, for each of the clients, their own goals. How do they map across to what are these broad categories of goals which are actually captured by this program? You then also need to relate that to a goal domain, because again, that's what the government is interested in funding. And again, you're actually filling it in twice, once at the beginning of the group and once at the end as a pre-group measure, you're using the same categories as you used in the client circumstance assessment of where were they at, and also again towards the end. There's room for having a second goal which you articulate as well. This does take time, but it's actually only being done on the first session and the last session.
That's right. And the important thing to remember is that wherever you have more than one goal, that they're in different categories. Because if they're in the same category, only one from each category will actually get pushed up to DEX.
That's a very important thing. Thank you so much about talking around MCO forms with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, we've now come to an end. It was a great discussion with Jonathan and myself around measuring client outcomes, how to get that form completed for groups. If you have any questions, please discuss them with the team leader or manager at your centre. There is a set of notes which does go with this, and also on SharePoint there's a very extensive set of notes around understanding measuring client outcomes and how that documentation is done. Enjoy your good group work.